Chapter 3, Kramer. Next day, Nathaniel told Sally to leave the closed sign up. He wanted to go to the bank early to deposit the $50 he'd saved up before he was tempted to spend it. You going to see Mr. Kramer?
Don't know yet. I'll decide when I decide.
Before we go, would you look at something?
Something like what?
Her face took on a serious expression, not quite a frown. She went to her room and returned a moment later with the sketchbook. Without a word, she held it out to him. He stared at it a moment, then brought it over to the light.
That's my rattlesnake, the one I gave Shoshone Bill. But it wasn't exactly. If anything, it was better. More realistic.
The mouth was open and spitting. The background was a desert landscape at either sunset or dawn. The sky a soft red ochre.
I see you took my lessons in perspective to heart.
I used some of my money to buy colored chalk.
Money well spent. You may be an artist yet.
He handed back the pad. She tucked it under one arm, her handbag under the other. Let's go to the bank.
You're taking the drawings?
I want to show them to someone else. He shrugged.
Okay, let's go.
At the bank, Mr. Cook had Sally fill out a form under the name Salome Jezebel. Then he pushed the form toward Nathaniel.
You'll have to sign as her guardian. But I'm not a legal guardian. I'm just a friend. Don't matter. The bank says she can't have an account without she has an adult sign for her. For the bank's purpose, you can be her guardian, unless she gets somebody else to sign for her.
Nathaniel shrugged and signed the paper.
Guess that means we're related, Sally.
She made a face, as if thinking she could imagine nothing worse, and handed Mr. Cook 5 $1 bills to open her account. He handed back a passbook, duly stamped.
Perhaps you would be kind enough to direct me to the Board of Trade office,
Nathaniel said. Mr. Cook gave him directions, and Nathaniel got up to leave. I'm going down to the newspaper, Sally said. I want to find out when that story about us is coming out.
About us? I thought it was supposed to be about me. No matter. See you back at the shop.
The small storefront, located on Golden Street, not far from the railroad station and the 66 Club, sported some potted plants in the window. Inside, a young lady sat at a desk with a typewriter, which didn't appear to get much use. She looked up from a magazine. Help you, sir?
Afternoon. I'm a new merchant in town. I was wondering about joining the Board of Trade.
Yes, sir. Why don't you grab yourself one of those pamphlets on the counter? They explain all the benefits and responsibilities and so on. He picked up a pamphlet and stuffed it into a pocket.
I was wondering if I might see Mr. Jeremiah Kramer.
He's not around today, sir. He usually checks in on Monday morning, but I'm sure I could help you with anything you need.
I think I'll wait till Monday. If you happen to see him, could you mention Nathaniel Strange came by?
Oh, he did say you might be in. He left a note for you. She pulled open her desk drawer, rummaged a moment, then pulled out an envelope. He glanced at it, noticed his name neatly typed on the outside. He said thanks and went back out to the street. Only then did he rip open the envelope. Inside, there was one sheet of paper with one line typed on it. How much do you want? 2 clients stopped by that afternoon, one a minor and another girl from Madame Lamar's. Sally was out all day. She showed up at supper time with some fresh vegetables from the market. He didn't ask where she'd been. If she wanted him to know, she'd tell him. He made a beef stew with some of the fresh carrots she'd brought. I saw a store here with a big plate glass window, she said. It's quite the thing. You can look right inside and see all the goods. They brought the glass in by railroad. Must have been hard.
I'll bet.
She held his gaze, studying him. I want to know the rest.
The rest of what?
You know, about Mr. Preen. You didn't really kill him, or you wouldn't be here looking for him. Why are you looking for him? He ladled stew into bowls, and they sat down to eat.
At first, I assumed he was dead. That person's unknown had killed him and disposed of the body, though I couldn't account for them using my pistol. It had to be someone with an interest in framing me for the crime. I thought about this Jeremiah Caldwell of Carson City. You'll remember the name from those newspaper clippings. I'd never heard of him before, but he was my only suspect. Of course, I didn't have enough money to hire detectives. It all went to my trial lawyers.
Sally stared at him, her food forgotten. He started to take a bite, then put down his own spoon.
I didn't think any different till I'd been out of prison for about a year. But Milton has a younger brother, Alfred. Al is quite different from Milton. He's honest, owns a furniture store in Baltimore. I believe Milton loaned him money to get started. Alfred is married with 2 kids, pillar of the church and so on. He came to me one day when I was working with Mr. Lou. I lived in a room of Mr. Lou's home. Alfred seemed uncomfortable, said he had something important to tell me. He hemmed and hawed for a while, then handed me a piece of paper. It was a letter from Milton.
So he was still alive. That's when you found out?
Yeah, it was written on a typewriter. It occurred to me later that I'd never seen Milton use handwriting. He would sign his name only when he had to, on legal papers and such. Alfred wouldn't let me keep the letter, but he allowed me to copy it. I still have the copy. Wait a minute.
He got up, went back out to the wagon, and returned with a wrinkled sheet of paper in hand. He spread it out on the packing crate and read aloud.
Dear Alfred, I hope this finds you well. I'm sorry I had to fool you and worry you all this time, thinking I was dead, but it was necessary. I'll explain more when I see you. I always told you I would let you in on a good thing. That's why I'm writing now. I'm here in Rhyolite, making my fortune finally. I'm wanting to help you out and your family, as I know times have not been easy for you. There are great fortunes to be made here in Nevada. While the time is ripe, please come out for a visit so I can show you. I hope I can convince you and the family to move on out and stake your own claim. I'm using a different name now. It wouldn't be good to put it in writing, but you won't have any trouble finding me. When you get to Rhyolite, just check in at the Board of Trade and let the girl down know where you're staying. I'll get the message right away. Don't let me down, Alfred. And be sure you don't show this letter to anyone else. See you when you get here. Signed, Milton.
Why didn't you go to the police? Sally asked. He shrugged.
What for? A typewritten letter doesn't prove anything. I could have typed it myself. Besides, why would the police be interested? I was tried and convicted. It was a closed case.
What about Jeremiah Caldwell? He laughed and picked up his spoon again.
Funny, it took me so long to figure that out. I wrote to various people in Carson City trying to locate him. I finally realized he didn't exist. It was another name used by Milton Preen. He'd set it up months in advance, paying rent at a rooming house so he could have mail sent there. He opened bank accounts under that name. His own lawyer thought Caldwell was a real person. After he faked his own death, he traveled to Nevada and became Caldwell, long enough to settle his own estate and collect the insurance money. I have to admit, the man was clever. After he got the cash, he must have seen that Rhyolite was the next bonanza. He changed his name again and moved here. I didn't know for absolute sure what that name was until today.
He pulled the new note from his pocket and showed it to her. She read the 5 words twice. Are ye going to ask him for money? You said you came to Rhyolite to get rich.
No, that wasn't quite true. Although I'd like to get rich like everyone else, the real reason I came was to ask Preen a question. I want to find out what happened to Annabelle, but I need to think on that their note for a while. Maybe see if I can find out what kind of fraud Preen is up to this time.
One Sunday, 3 weeks later, he asked Sally what she wanted to do.
I hear the Lutherans are having an ice cream social this afternoon,
he said. Don't think I'll attend. She picked up her sketchbook and a pencil, studied them as if deep in thought.
You have that book filled up?
Yep, I better get a new one. Wonder if they have any in that big store downtown.
Wouldn't be surprised. You plan to spend the day doing art?
I thought I'd go on over to Madame Lamar's and draw some of the girls. They seem to like that.
In that case, I believe I'll drop in at the 66 Club. All the best people in town show up there.
Including Jed Kramer? He nodded.
Maybe. You never know.
He spent some time wandering the streets, watching people. Young boys ran about like wild Indians. On Golden Street, ladies promenaded with their proper daughters. He passed a church from which organ music escaped. It was still early. By mid-afternoon, Rhyolite citizens would be fleeing from the heat. At the railroad station, he found a bench in the shade. He picked up a discarded copy of the Herald. Most of the news inside was gossip. Mr. and Mrs. Beatty have returned from a trip to St. Louis, etc. There was an item about last week's production of ore, something about progress in San Francisco's reconstruction after the quake and fire. Not much in the way of crime news, other than one reported burglary and some complaints about claim jumping. Rhyolite appeared a law-abiding town. For a while, he dozed. Then he got up and wandered over to the 66 Club. By then, it was early afternoon, when business would be picking up. A half hour or so later, Edmund J. Fish walked in and sat across the table.
How do you like our town so far? He asked. Well enough, Mr. Fish, though it could use a few amenities such as a public library and a park. A lake would be nice.
Fish laughed.
All that will come, my friend. Even the lake. We do have 3 swimming pools now. In the winter, they're skating rinks. Maybe next year we'll build a lake. It's all a matter of investment money. We have big plans for this town. So I hear. I'm told there are some major investors around, such as Jed Kramer. You heard right. Mr. Kramer's done well in mining and real estate. He's what we call a speculator, pillar of the community. Although, speaking in confidence, I don't much care for the fellow.
Where does he live? Nathaniel asked between sips of beer. Fish looked puzzled.
To tell the truth, I'm not sure. I believe he has a house out on the edge of town. It can't be too far, though, or he'd have to truck in his water. You never been to his home? Can't say as I have. Kramer is a private person. Plays his cards close to his chest, you see. I suppose a man with so much money has to do that. He wouldn't want a lot of drummers and promoters dropping in. I suppose not. I hear he owns the Indian Billy mine. Used to. He did discover it, but he later sold the rights for a good price. Of course, that particular mine is still in the startup phase. It hasn't actually shown a profit yet, but I'm sure it will. Just give it time. I'm hoping they'll go public so I can buy some stock. Let me know when they do.
Nathaniel said. Later, he went back to the shop to cook supper, but Sally hadn't shown up. He made fried chicken, ate his fill, and put some aside for her. Then he spent an hour or so sketching some tattoo ideas. By that time, it was getting dark. He'd started to worry a bit, but then she came home. Smells good, she said.
It is good. Where you been all this time? Not that it's any of my business.
No, it ain't. I've been working.
At Madame Lamar's?
He couldn't resist a sudden fear. Yes, but not the way you're thinking. She smirked at him. I've been drawing pictures.
Drawing? I'm glad to hear it.
He gave a small sigh of relief.
Can I see your pictures?
No. She was helping herself to chicken. I sold them all.
Really? Sold them to who?
To the girls. They like the way I draw their faces. I draw all 8 of them. They paid me $1 each. I even drew one of the gentlemen visitors. That's more than I make working for you. Now I gotta get me a new sketch pad tomorrow. Maybe 2 or 3.
That's fine, Sally. That's really quite fine. Keep up the good work.
When are you going to teach me how to tattoo?
Let me think about that. I'll have to find some rawhide for you to practice on.
Okay. I'm tired. Think I'll go to bed after I wash the supper dishes.
Sounds like a good idea. Oh, I'm not sleepy, though. I wish I could find a good book to read. That's one thing this town lacks, is a library. Though they do have a fine school. Not many students, but a good school. What grade did you finish, Sally?
She stuck out her tongue. I ain't going back to school. He shrugged.
Suit yourself. Stay ignorant for all I care. I'm going out for a walk.
It's dark out.
There's almost a full moon tonight. Besides, this town has electric street lights. Not a library, but light to read by. Lock the door when I go out.
Instead of going back to the saloon, he walked out toward the mine. Sunday night in Rhyolite was as quiet as it would ever get there. The only places still open were the saloons. The stamping mill wouldn't resume its din until next morning, nor were there any miners heading for their next shift. He walked until he came in view of the mine. He noticed some lights on in one of the buildings and wondered who might be working there at this hour. Maybe just some watchman. He turned around and headed for home. It wasn't until after he'd entered the alley that he heard the sound of a soft footstep somewhere behind him. If the town hadn't been so quiet, he'd never have noticed. He walked a little faster. At one point, he glanced back and glimpsed the silhouette of a man in the moonlight. Nathaniel thought he recognized the figure. In fact, he would have known the shape of that body anywhere. It was the massive form of his client, Omar. He considered his best strategy. He might duck into a doorway and try to conceal himself till the man passed. His chances of getting away with that were slim. He wished he'd had a weapon, a knife or a club. He scanned the unpaved street for something to use, even a rock, but could see nothing in the darkness. He kept moving. His best chance, he thought, was to get around the next corner and back to the main street. Then it was only another block to his storefront. If only there were more people about. He made it as far as the corner and ducked into the intersecting alley. That would take him back to the street in only a few paces. That was when they jumped him. They didn't say anything. One moment he was moving quickly down the alleyway. Next he was flat on his face in the dirt. A hard kidney punch knocked the wind out of him so he couldn't yell. Then he was yanked to his feet. There were 2 of them. One had his arms pinned behind him, while the other drove a fist into his solar plexus. Nathaniel nearly blacked out. He couldn't get a breath. The one who had punched him shoved his face next to his.
A friend of ours says you ought to leave town, like right away.
He drew his fist back for a blow to Nathaniel's face. Nathaniel shut his eyes and clenched his jaw. But the blow didn't come. When he opened his eyes, he was looking into Omar's face. Omar was looking past him, over Nathaniel's shoulder. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to.
Hey, listen now.
The man holding him let go of Nathaniel, who staggered and nearly fell. With one hand, Omar grabbed Nathaniel's shoulder to steady him and swung his other at the man behind him. Nathaniel heard an oof, then the sound of a body hitting the ground. In the dim light, Nathaniel could make out the form of the other thug stretched out full length behind Omar. When Nathaniel regained his breath, he said,
"What did you do to him?"
Omar showed him a small leather-covered object, a blackjack. He slipped it back into his pocket.
"I heard these fellas talking back at the mine yesterday, waiting for shift change. They think I'm stupid, don't understand English, so they don't care what they say around me. They say they're going to wait for you, jump you sometime tonight when you go to your shop. So I come out here to wait. I would warn you, but you not home." "Thanks, Omar. I owe you a debt. Do you know why they wanted to jump me?"
Omar shrugged.
"Somebody paid them. Come on, I get you home."
He took Nathaniel's arm, though by that time Nathaniel was feeling better.
"Something else I was going to tell you,"
Omar said.
"I guess that money you give me brings me luck, all right." "What money?" "Oh, you mean the 20 I put on your shoulder? What sort of luck?" "Heh, I got me into a card game last night. Me, I don't usually do that. I likes to save. Just thought I'd give it a try. I win $53. No kidding. Maybe you should let me put 100 on your other shoulder." "Maybe so. I think about it. Come by the 66 Club when you get off shift tomorrow. I'll buy you a couple of beers."
Omar grunted.
"That place too high toned for the likes of me. Anyway, I be a teetotaler."
Nathaniel managed a laugh.
"Maybe that's just as well, Omar. Maybe that's just as well."